Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for sharing your wonderful guitar performance with us. I'm Ellen Cole, and I'm hosting the reading tonight, along with our series founder, Karen Alanier, and my co-host, Borgie Senhausen. Our technical wizard tonight is Henry Crawford, doing his magic behind the scenes. Café Muse has been presenting outstanding literary programs for 23 years. Our featured poets tonight are Lindsay Lusby and Charlotte Matthews. I'll be introducing Charlotte, and Borgie will introduce Lindsay. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books tonight and to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. The links for buying the books and for making donations will be in our chat. You may notice audience members have been muted. This will help prevent feedback problems for our readers and will ensure uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. During the reading, you may use chat to comment or to ask a question that our readers may answer during the question and answer period, moderated by Karen Alanier. Our program is scheduled to last 1 hour. Our next Café Muse reading will take place on Monday, March 1st, and will feature poets Terry Cross Davis and Jane Clark. Jane is going to be Zooming with us from Ireland. Now, I'm very pleased to present our first poet for this evening, Charlotte Matthews. Charlotte is the author of 3 poetry collections, Whistle What Can't Be Said, Green Stars, and Still Enough to Be Dreaming. A memoir, Comes with Furniture and People, which was a finalist in the 2020 Next Generation Indie Book Award, and just out in December 2020, a novel, The Collapsible Mannequin. She's also published 2 poetry chapbooks. Her work has appeared in many literary journals, including Rattle, Gulf Coast, Chautauqua, Greensbury Review, American Poetry Review, and Virginia Quarterly Review. Charlotte teaches at the University of Virginia. Honors she's received include the Adele Robertson Award for Excellence in Teaching, the New Writing Award for Southern Writers, and fellowships from the Chautauqua Institute, the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Charlotte uses everyday language to create elegant, skillfully constructed work. Her poems are quotidian, poignant, rich with sound and images. She tells her students, a poem is not a riddle, it's a key. And this maxim is reflected in her work. Her book, Whistle What Can't Be Said, focuses on her treatment for stage 3 breast cancer and inspired her to co-found and teach in WhistleWorks, a writing program for women who are undergoing cancer treatment and are also for women who are cancer survivors. Reviewer Mary Lee Allen writes this of Charlotte's book, Green Stars. With metaphors, images of dreams and shadows, half light, dim light, and fragile light, Matthews transports us gently into rich solitudes, ripened by an aura of music, mystery, and wistfulness. And now, let me turn you over to poet Charlotte Matthews.
Thank you so very much. What a generous, generous introduction. I appreciate it. Can you see me and hear me okay? Great. So because you used the word quotidian, I'll just bring a little home stuff in. So since we're at home, so I have this teddy bear. We call him pre-op because my dog, my new puppy, chewed off its ear. So pre-op is here helping me with the reading tonight. And I also just want to thank everyone who's taken the time to come. I know that it can be hard to be on so many Zoom sessions, and I'm going to stay well within my parameter of 25 minutes and do it nice and clear. All right, I'm going to begin by reading a few new poems, and then I'll move on. I was very intrigued by Helen Keller, as I think we all are. But I also have been intrigued by the fact that she had a brother, and did a bit of research about her brother, who was somewhat ignored during her coming up. And so this poem is called Companion to the Mind. And it begins with an epigraph from Helen Keller, which is, everything has its wonders, even darkness. Companion to the mind. Someone forgot to close the window, and inside on the wormwood floor is a safety pin from William's trousers, flawless and dazzling as his sister's descriptions of things she cannot see. William loves sleep and pecans, and the way his mother bends over her mending, hours of it, making things whole again. A thimbleful is still something, he thinks, an amount, just small. He plays a solitary game of marbles, kneeling cautiously outside the ring. Helen's teacher spells words into the palm of her hand. They start with water, which is where we all do. And Helen gets it right away. It calms her down, this putting the world together. William watches, thinking of the fox whose den is a secret, of Helen touching sun through the window, touching, which is how his sister sees. Everything we imagine doing, everything we never forget, everything we cannot name. I'm going to read two short pieces dedicated to three friends who were in the room, Vicky Pete, Topsy Vest, and Liz Nightingale, who all went to school with me and will well remember. This is a part from my memoir, but is kind of more lyrical. And I hope you guys will laugh so hard that you'll have to pee your pants. In elementary school, in addition to kickball and dodgeball for gym, we had a class called movement. Mrs. Adams had a tambourine, and she'd hit it once, signaling us to skip or hop or sashay in one direction around the green flecked linoleum gym. Then she'd hit her instrument a second time, and that was our call to lie down on our backs and be as still as we possibly could. And we remained that way for well over a minute. I remember hearing my own heartbeat for the first time, my palms turned upward to the acoustic ceiling tiles. I could hear it, thump, 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 thump. How strange it was to be aware of what made me me. Since we're back to the subject of school, let me tell you about Mrs. Linston. B. Linston was tall and commanding and apparently had only one set of clothes. I remember her wearing the exact same cabled gray cardigan sweater with teeny knit buttons every single day. And she wore a navy blue wool pleated skirt every single day, and argyle socks and penny loafers every day. She was head of the elementary school, which made her in charge of our weekly assemblies. Each Monday morning, we would file in an orderly line into the gymnasium and sit cross-legged on the floor according to grade, with the first graders in the front row. The sixth graders got to sit on chairs in the back. And the faculty stood. In front of us, Mrs. Lindsay informed us that since it was Monday, we had a new chance to be our best selves. She would say, "Good morning, children. Since today is Monday, you get to be a new you, the you you've always wanted to be, kind and courageous and honest." She'd chew on the arm of her reading glasses that hung from a string around her neck and say those words as persuasively, and they soaked in a kind of cosmos. Then she'd read to us a book, Where the Red Fern Grows, The Giving Tree, which I consider to be a perilous book. When we would listen engaged on the cold Monday after Monday after Monday, sometimes we had a guest, an author or politician, someone famous. We were in Washington after all. But to the arachnologist, we gave our undivided attention. When he whipped out a tarantula, holding it in the palm of his hand and letting us know that their diet consisted of snakes and frogs and bats, well, he had us all hooked. After the visitor, we'd close with the Lord's Prayer and be on our way to class, striving, at least for this one moment, to be our best selves for the rest of the week. So that's for Vicki and Topsy and Liz. I'm gonna now read a few poems from a new book I'm working on. I guess I read one earlier, but here we go. So I guess Kmart's have closed all over. Not sure if that's true, but right now in Charlottesville, Virginia, the Kmart is actually serving as a site to give the vaccine. And I have a friend who's a doc who's there, so he and I are going to write a companion poem. But I was thinking about how sad it was that Kmart was closing, so I wrote this poem. Kmart's closing, and everything's on sale. Even the bath mats look beleaguered, aware of their uncertain fortune. I buy a miniature plum tree at half price, but when I get it to the car and place it on the floorboard of the back seat, it looks at me regretfully, like both of us are doomed. Me and the plum tree, done for. Long gone are the blue light specials, which could happen at any moment, astound you with a flashing light and siren right in the middle of the store. I tell this to the oldest man in my mindfulness group. He listens, like you'd expect him to, then shows me a photo of a cobalt butterfly that floated just this morning right over his yard. Spent a lot of time thinking about, I have a brother, one brother who's older than me, and we lost our parents young, and been thinking about how you weigh loss, the idea of how do you weigh something that you've lost. My brother Clark is very practical and has a lot of facts. And so particularly when our mother was dying, he kind of invited me with facts. That's all you need to know for this poem. How to weigh loss. Even though seesaws are a thing of the past, I'll return to a warm June evening when my brother and I have walked to the local elementary school. We seat ourselves on opposite ends, hold on to the metal handles, and rise and descend, one in the air, the other on the ground, small craters where other children have done the same with their feet. We pull out tangerines we've stashed in our windbreakers, peel them in unison, one of us suspending the other, trusting a smooth descent. Decades later, on an interstate, he explains how truck scales work, how the driver stops every so many 100 miles to weigh the cargo, invisible load he's been hauling over state lines. And I wonder if we can counterbalance losing our parents so abruptly like we did, as he lists objects with identical weights, a toaster and a human brain, a football and a box of sugar. I've been thinking a lot about aging, as we, I think, all do, and about how, well, that's all I'll say. This is called Cautionary Tale. Two men in white shirts fish for largemouth bass from a green boat. The lake is small, little more than a pond, and the men well past middle age. Unremarkable except for their glistening, their silent not moving, the way they drift nimbly, an unpracticed dance. It's August, pinholed leaves yellow the water, where the first remnant of the mastodon, a 5-pound tooth, was found in the 1700s. The boat is moss, exact shade of the paint chip I've been considering for the shutters, because it's never too late to change things. The mastodon is long gone, as are all the other mammals who didn't make it through the Ice Age. Saber-toothed cats and ground sloths, great beasts we know about from fossils and cave drawings, the rare frozen carcass. I watch as the men float in their boat, casting and retrieving bright lures, unbrooded by the lengthening shadows. So I have two children. One is 22, my daughter Emma, and my son is 19. And my daughter works in the emergency room as a technician and also as an EMT. So that might be some information to help kind of tether this poem. And it's entitled The Uncertainty Project. When I was my daughter's age, I tried to rinse my heart of worry, but that did not work. So I took to running, not away, but toward the sycamore whose bark peels in strips whiter than white, the color of bone, running in the direction of what would harm me. In physics, the uncertainty principle states that the position and speed of an object cannot be measured at the exact same time accurately. But what about that marble rolling across your grandmother's kitchen floor? Or the car that just swished by on the highway? We know where and how fast they are moving. Physicists use words like unpredictable and knocked about to explain what happens if you try to measure an electron, keep watch over mystery, which has no known components or structure. So I'll read two more, just in the thing of just, it's good to like be shorter rather than longer. I've always thought about the idea of Humpty Dumpty, We all know the Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, but why in the world did he fall? And I was thinking about that during my cancer treatment, how many people helped me. And so this is a wee poem. Why Humpty Dumpty Fell. There were three girls jumping double dutch on the blacktop below him, and he looked down because even their voices sounded nimble. This made him remember the way his mother sang him to sleep at night. Each star in the sky reliably framed in a hexagon from their wire coop. He fell because, like all of us, he wanted to know if someone would care enough to put him back together again. And then for my friends from elementary school, this is sort of about our small math teacher and how people were not very nice to her. For a limited time only. Let us not forget that all things go the way of the fanny pack and the chia pet. Look back at high school, envision getting a redo on that one. I sat in the last row of math class, loosening the screws in the bulletin board until the metal that encased my pencil eraser. After weeks, the board began to jostle there on the wall, and this seemed perfectly fine until it fell. And our overworked teacher stooped to pick all those handouts strewn on the speckled floor. The TV warns of this one amazing one-time offer we best take advantage of right now as we grow older, staring at the box of Cheerios that will expire in May. So thank you all very much for listening. And I had a student who said to me once, getting to read makes me feel real. So thank you all.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was lovely. Next, my co-host, Borges and Hausen, will introduce our next reader, Lindsay Lusby.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Charlotte. That was beautiful. I'm so glad to introduce Lindsay Lusby to you tonight. I've had the pleasure to meet and hear her read about a year ago. One of the last readings at Zed's in Silver Spring, which Dorrit Carroll used to organize. Maybe some of you know those. Lindsay Lusby is a poet, editor, and senior poetry reader for Cherry Tree. She's also a letterpress printer and freelance graphic designer and makes beautiful broadsides on demand. I invite you to explore her website for this and other services. I'll put the link in the chat later on, so check it out. Her three big loves, horror movies, fairy tales, and names for wildflowers, are all intertwined collage-like in her debut collection, Catechesis, a post-pastoral. Collage as form is inherently iconoclastic, intentionally interactive, and literally shape-shifting. Familiar seams are severed and made to cleave along new edges. The fitting is never exact, but always stimulating. A kaleidoscope of free associations for the reader and author alike. Collage, then, is a brilliant choice by Lusby to render her haunting catechesis, where the reader becomes at once voyeur and pupil of a catechist who is playful the way a cat is playful with a mouse, and yet whose post-pastoral apocalyptic voice refuses to forgo lyricism and fearlessly affirms vulnerability, which you will hear tonight. Catechesis, a post-pastoral, won the Aga Shahid Ali Poetry Prize, judged by Kimiko Hahn. It was published by the University of Utah Press in 2019. Apart from Catechesis, Lindsay Lusby has published 2 chapbooks, Blackbird, Whitetail, Red Hand, published by Pork Belly Press in 2018, and Imago, published by Dancing Girl Press in 2014. She has won the 2015 Fairy Tale Review Poetry Prize, and her work appears in such journals as New South, Gulf Coast, the Cincinnati Review, Passages North, Plume, and Waxwing. She lives in Chestertown, Maryland. I'm very much looking forward to hearing you, Lindsay. So take it away.
Thank you so much for that, Borgie. That was a lovely introduction, and thank you again for all of your kind words about my book. It means more to me than you can ever know. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to Café Muse and Leah, Henry, Ellen, Karen, Borgie, Susan. I don't think I missed anybody, but I might have. Everybody who helps to put this series together, especially now that things have changed. You guys have adapted wonderfully and are still bringing literature to people at home. And I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Tonight I'm going to read a few poems from Catechesis of Postpastoral, and then I thought I'd read some other newer poems. They've all been published in literary magazines over the past couple of years, but they're part of a new manuscript that I'm still working on. All right, so I'll start with some poems from the book, because it's always exciting to read poems from an actual book. It's still fairly new to me. And as Borgie said, my main inspirations are fairy tales and horror movies and wildflowers too, for sure. Some of my Catholic upbringing also makes its way into these poems, in the background a little bit, and in some of the diction. So I thought I would begin at the beginning of the book, actually, with a series of fairy tale poems. These poems are based on the Grimm fairy tale, The Maiden Without Hands. As Grimm fairy tales tend to be, it's a rather grisly story, or grisly at the beginning at least, and then it's a very long and winding tale, and it definitely has some Christian overtones. But yeah, so I've started there and then just taken it in my own direction. So the first poem is called Girl with No Hands. Her own father mistook her for an apple tree, full-trunked and red-cheeked, so he hacked at limbs, a bedlam of branches and hands. He believed in the fruits of his delirium, that the daughter tree cut back would grow wiser next year, that the bees come to roost would sweeten the crop. He tells her, if you love me, you will leaf and bud. If you love me, you will ripen. Interlude. A girl has 2 choices, to be a tree or to be the forest. If she leaves her father's house, she can shrink into the dark alleys between oaks, brimming gutters under brush, with so many eyes shining out. They will coo at her, call her Red Delicious or Pink Lady. If she has no hands, she will go head first, by the skin of her teeth, by the point of her chin, sharpening as she runs. If she follows that beating black bird, she will tangle herself in understory, in those quiet degrees of shade. And then the next 3 poems are all titled Forestry. And this is part 1. The girl with no hands prefers to imagine herself a bird. Pink pigeon feet and tiny holy bones. The heart in throat murmurs. An unhanded bird is still a bird, is still worth its weight in breadcrumbs. Part 2. The girl with no hands carries her heart in her teeth, a muffled 2-step that becomes her name, twig snap and recoil, soil deep in bear trap. It all hinges on bone and ligament, this lockjaw love, its metallic aftertaste. And part 3. The girl with no hands listens behind her for the tramping of lumberjacks, the temper of boots against bark. If a felled girl falls in a forest, does it sound inevitable? A flogged girl dragged back to the sawmill, she hears the swarming rattle of locusts. So let's see, after this, yeah, I think I'll just go right into the next section, which will be the last that I'll read from the book. This book is divided into 5 different sections, 3 of which are based on particular fairy tales or invented fairy tales, and then the other 2 are dedicated to 2 of my favorite horror movies. And the poems in those sections all take their titles from lines of dialogue from the movie. So I would pick a particularly evocative line from the movie and plop that in as the title of my poem, and then just wrote from there, and just kind of turned it into some horror movie fairy tale mashup. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great project. I've continued writing some poems in that style after I finished this book, and I'll probably do more in the future, just because it's a really fun thing to do, to engage with some of your favorite movies that way. This group of poems is based on The Silence of the Lambs, which of course is one of my favorites, as I said, but it helps that there's a strong female at the head of the story, who's leading the way, and she has a very evocative name as well. I thought it was very poetic, Agent Starling, Clarice Starling. So I, in a fairy tale way, decided to turn her into a bird. In some of these poems, she kind of moves back and forth between being a bird and being a human, but she's always bird-like. This first poem is called "Do You Spook Easily, Starling?" A stone slung-shot in the brush is a body face down in the river. We drop our scavenging and scatter. Every shattered thing underfoot we will call evidence. The map we make of it, a murder. And to go with these, I put together some visual poems that are multimedia collage, and it's kind of hard to make out this way, but here's one of them. And each of the poems in this section is paired with one of these visual poems. The next one is called "That Is Rather Slippery of You, Agent Starling." When the truth is small enough to fit in your cupped hands, you chase it with a broom to every corner of the house, to pin its bristling body there against the papered cabbage roses. When it beats between your fingers, all sinew snap and barbed air, you will know it is less hope than feather, more crush than bone. Why do you think he removes their skins, Agent Starling? Are you a bird in a woman's suit, Clarice? Some pretty little blood sparrow, such lung span, such bright palpitation, red thread, red thread, red thread. Peeled back, you are the same shade of robin redbreast. You are plucked up, ready for love to wear you like a girl pelt and preen. Look at him, Starling. Tell me what you see. Or still life with crime scene photos and newspaper clippings. We will know him by the bodies of his work, an arm unsleeved of skin, and another, a blouse split up the back like a ladybird. Witness in the mud well of a boot print, gunpowder and mothwing. There, a ditch-deep arrangement of ankles. Here, a headline reads, "Fathers, hide your daughters." And this one is called How Do We Begin to Covet, Clarice? And there's actually an interesting little tangent to give you some background about this one. There's a perfume that is mentioned in the movie that Clarice is wearing, or was wearing at some point, and then when she visits Hannibal Lecter, he can still smell the faint remnants of this perfume on her, and he recites it back to her, and it's L'air du Temps by Nina Ricci. So a few years ago, I embarked on an anthology project with my friend and mentor, Jean Dubrow, and we put together an entire anthology of brand new poems from poets across the country that were inspired by perfumes. We sent them perfumes, and they sent poems back to us that were in some way in conversation with experiencing this scent. They didn't have to be exactly about it, but just they shook something loose for them, and this is the poem that came out. So I had written one of those while we were working on the project, but then when I started working on these poems, Majan said to me, "There's a perfume mentioned in that movie. You should write a perfume poem about that." So I bought a vial of the perfume because it wasn't too expensive, and spent some time with it, smelled it, made some notes, and this is the poem that came out of it. So again, it's called How Do We Begin to Covet, Clarice? And the epigraph is After L'air du Temps by Nina Ricci. When a look is not enough, you must dig a hole inside her and bury your ruin there. In the hollow of her, offerings of clove bud and oak moss, sawdust and rosewater. Smell the florid rot of want, the humid musk of need. Let them choke on each other until they are one blurred retching, a wintering hawk moth pulled whole from your throat. And this is the last poem in this sequence, and it's called Have the Lambs Stopped Screaming? When you find him, will you ask for a glass of water, for a handful of sugar, to use the phone? Already, she is hanging inside him from a meat hook, a field-dressed tenderfoot swinging by her ankles. Does he know that you know? When he is asleep, rip him open like a barn door. So that's from Catechesis of Post-Pastoral, which you can find on the Café Muse site, but also wherever books are sold, basically. So wherever you prefer to buy from, if you feel so inclined. Thank you. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, mostly so you don't think that I only write about really grisly subjects. I mean, a lot of my poems do tend in that direction, because that really is my aesthetic. But I do have other interests. So I thought I'd read some of my newer poems. There are these first three that I'm going to read are about my my obsession with letterpress printing. So just for people who aren't familiar with letterpress printing, I'm sure a lot of you are. There are letterpress printing is when you set type letter by letter. The type is raised. It creates a physical impression in the paper. I'm sorry, I'm not practiced at describing this anymore. I used to describe it all the time. But basically, you set the type letter by letter, you place it in the bed of the press, and it is raised, not an engraving, the opposite of an engraving, and you ink the type, and then the paper is pressed physically into it, and you actually make a physical impression in the paper that you can feel. It's a lot of fun. And the press that I used to use most often is called a Vandercook, and that type of press, it's a cylinder press. And the mechanism for that is there's this big drum that's called a tympan. It's just big round cylinder. You attach your paper to that. The print bed is flat at the base of this drum. There are a couple of stacked ink rollers that oscillate against each other so that they're constantly redistributing the ink so it's even. Those rollers move ahead of the cylinder, they ink the type, and then the paper is rolled over top of the type, which is in the flat bed, and then you pull it out and you have your print. One of the next poem is about that. This first one though is called Girl as Pantone Matching System. The Pantone matching system is it's a way for mixing any color that you can imagine for graphic designers and printers. So we would have this big book and it looks like a bunch of paint swatches. It looks just like that. It's like all the shades going down, and all of these every color is assigned a number, and it's the abbreviation for Pantone matching system is PMS. So they have a PMS number. And next to that you have like the ingredients, the mixing colors and how much you would mix for each one in order to create this color of ink. So that's probably all the backstory that you will need for this next one, Girl as Pantone Matching System. And it's broken into sections. Each section is a different number representing a color. PMS 483. Inside, she knows she is brick brown and blood muddy. She can see it, absolute as a number, 2 parts rubine red, 2 parts yellow, 1 part black. And this is about menstruation, in case you didn't pick that up. PMS 2765. When she reaches into her own wet warmth, it is thick, tacky, hardly like blood at all. Her fingertips, the purple black of ripe pokeberries. PMS 7594. Press troubleshooting. She brims over. Print is fuzzy or blotches on cotton and rag. The ink looks like it's bleeding. Too much ink, too much ink. Wash the press and start again. PMS 497. She lines her underwear with tympan paper. When the tampon fills and bloats, what remains makes a blood proof of herself, 5 parts warm red, 3 parts green, 2 parts black. PMS 1817. She coagulates until she's the perfect shade of roadkill red, rolled out against the bleed edge, inked on rubber and metal. So there was actually some borrowed language in the 3rd section of that from a letterpress instruction book. Okay, so this next one is called Girl as Vandercook 4 Proof Press. And that's the press that I described a little earlier. Diagram of a face. Rollers curve like cheekbone, like jawline, like eyebrow. She traces contours with a palette knife and blends and blends and blends. Metal as a kind of bone, bone as a means to bend. She presses dampened paper soft against her rigid edges. What's left of her kissed mouth smudge, her ink-lipped smack. Oils blot away her clotted red pinks like cold cream and water. This next one combines letterpress with one of my favorite fairy tales. And that fairy tale is The Crane Wife. It's a Japanese folk tale or fairy tale, somewhere in the middle there. But it's also based on a little bit of American history. All of the women that I name in each, it's broken into 5 sections, and each section is titled with a woman's name, and each of those women are actual women who were printers in colonial America. And a lot of them became printers after their husbands who were printers died. So they took over the business and became independent afterward. So they're pretty badass. I think they're pretty amazing. They also had really amazing names, as you will hear. So this is my letterpress version of Crane Wife, called Press Wife. And the epigraph: in late 17th and 18th century America, many printers' wives took over the business after their husbands fell ill or died. Dinah Nuthead flourished 1696. Her flywheel heart pumps harder now. A wounded bird on crane leg spokes, a widowed rib bone raging from its cage. She will salvage all she needs from loss. She will not waste any of her parts. Elizabeth Timothy, 1702 to 1757. She uncorsets herself rib from rib, bottles them for bone black. She burns them down to char, a color airless as deep night sky, moonless as morning dress. Anna Katharina Zenger, 1704 to 1751. She warms her hands at the millstone, blends her waxen ink, boiled linseed oil, bone black for pigment, pine resin to bind. Cornelia Smith Bradford, died 1755. She lays her type in raised rows like milk teeth, line by line by line, all these small mouths to feed. Her long S reaching out over ligatures, slender and curved as a crane's neck. Anne Catherine Hoof Green, 1720 to 1775. What late news, which fresh noose? She prints her galleys on cotton rag, holds them to the light until truth bleeds through, dark winged against cloud white sky. A lot of them were printing newspapers. Just a little tidbit there. And the last section is Clementina Bird Rind, 1740 to 1774. Any good wife knows how to disappear. She props open a window, thinks crow, thinks sparrow, thinks crane. She rearranges her bones, movable ligaments and marrow, composes a new form. Her waning body only press and release. So I realized partway through that if you're not familiar with the Crane Wife story, one of the main ideas of that is toyed with in there is a woman or a crane who is also a woman using parts of her, like sacrificing parts of her body to make something that is profitable for the man in her life that she is grateful for because he saved her after she was shot with an arrow. So that was kind of the idea going into this, that the women used parts of themselves in the printing process. So hopefully that came through. Yeah, so clearly I have a weird thing about women turning into birds. This is a common theme throughout all of these poems, including my last one here, which is not a letterpress poem. This is actually a much more personal poem. It is about my mother mourning her own mother who died 10 years ago this year. And it's called Mother as Haunting as Mourning Dove. My mother's mother has the softest feathers I have ever touched, like the gray dust of mothwing scales, marking my impious hands with ash. The brightest color she owns is the dusk pink of her taloned feet and toes, the bloodless blue of her closed eyelids. Is it true her bones are hallowed? The way my mother holds her small body could make me believe in life after. My mother looks for owls at the window, holy ghosts in the early morning dark. But a dove at moonset sounds like this, the long and spectral O of longing that wakes her to half-light and hoarfrost, where mother is just a psalm we sing to the answering ether. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay. That was beautiful. Wonderful. Now we go over to our question and answer session with Karen Alanier.
Thank you, Bergie, and thank you to our readers tonight. I'm going to try this out on you. It may be a little bit challenging, but I think in the end, you'll figure out what to do with it. And the question is, could you talk about your use of various frames? And I want to start with Charlotte. And Charlotte, I think that your frames work in the field of science and physics. Maybe that's not true, but see what you can do with that question. What are your frames about and how do you?
Absolutely, yeah. I like the word frames too, because something just like the bookshelf behind you, those are frames, things we can put into frames. I think our minds are always interested in something, whether it's literal, visual, or oral. And I believe that I work in frames. Some of them have to do with far away memory. Some of them have to do with present memory, and some of them have to do with the future. So those frames create a poem, and a poem is like a box. I like the idea of a poem being a box, something small that you can open and then close. A poem is contained, as opposed to a short story, which has expansiveness around it. A poem has these perimeters and has frames. And so within the frames of it are the memories, and I have to go to a specific place in the mind.
Okay. All right, because I think it's really interesting that you equate it to, you know, a box, just a container of sorts. Yesterday I was hearing a poem that had to do with bowls and pockets. And so, you know, I think that poets are always interested in the containers around the words that we are offering. Lindsay, what do you say? What are your frames and how do you best use them?
So usually when I am approaching a poem, I do usually already have a particular idea in mind of where, at least where I want to start, and the elements that I know I want to be included. I'm not sure how it will turn out in the end, but I know the ingredients basically. So the frame of the poem is basically, it provides the restriction that I need in order to put these things together in a way that I guess it can't overflow that frame, basically. So I have to pick and choose these little details from other various areas, like a movie or a fairy tale, or just other things that have inspired me, like mushrooms, the idea of mycelium, everything connecting together under the ground, that combined with ESP and people connecting. That's another poem that I've written recently. So the poem provides that limited area where I can play with these elements and piece them together into something new. But I guess in general, my frames tend to be stories that I'm already familiar with. For a lyric poet, I'm very drawn to narrative. So I take the skeletons of these stories that I already know, these fairy tales, these movies, and then I work within that and rearrange the pieces and add something new, but it has to fit in a predetermined spot, because it's there, the story has already been laid out. Sorry, I know that was kind of rambling. I hope that actually made sense in some way.
Yes, and what made me think of something, and that is that poets use form as a frame. So one of you, I don't remember which one, wrote a ghazal or got some kind of recognition for having written a ghazal. So the form can be a type of frame as well. So yeah, I think, you know, you can frame your poems with stories as well as with music, which I heard a lot of in Charlotte's work. And so the lyricism, you know, comes out in different ways. Is there anybody in the chat? Has anybody noticed that has asked any questions? I haven't seen any. And if I haven't, I'm going to turn it back to Ellen, and Ellen's going to remind us of who's coming up and close out this wonderful program. And thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to see everybody here. And Ellen, I'm turning it back to you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that interesting question and for those very interesting answers. Excuse me. And thank all of you, our wonderful audience, for coming. And I hope you enjoyed this evening's readers and will extend your enjoyment to purchasing books and letting others know about our series. I also want to thank our readers again for today's program. You were both fabulous. Lindsay Lusby and Charlotte Matthews, as well as WordWorks and Karen Alanier for sponsoring our program, Michael Davis for his beautiful music, Henry Crawford for his technical expertise, and the Café Muse co-hosts, Susan Oki, Borgie Zenhausen, Renee Garrity, Leah Johnson, and Henry Crawford. Good night, everyone, and I hope I'll see you next month.